comment section on this video should be interesting. In my head. Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Liberty. I'm out here in the woods again, and we're actually going to be talking about whether victims gaslight their abusers. Now, obviously this may not be the video for you if you're in a very heightened, anxious state, so please be mindful of that and maybe come back to it later at a time when you're more peaceful, but I wanted to discuss this. I think it's important for our mental health. Just to quickly recap what gaslighting is when somebody attempts to make somebody else doubt their reality. And we all do this a little bit to some extent when we question other people, but when it becomes a pattern, it becomes abusive. And the person who's gaslighting sometimes is intentionally doing it to get that person to be more susceptible to manipulation, to be able to get them to do the things that that person wants them to do. So let's take a scenario here. Let's say there's a woman and she's been abused and she's talking with her friend and she's saying to her friend, you know, I just hate myself. I'm a horrible person. I deserve everything that happened to me. That friend, upon hearing this, might say to that person, you know, I don't think that this is true. I don't think you deserve what happened to you, and you aren't a horrible person. Now, in response, the woman says to this, what are you talking about? Don't you believe me? I am a horrible person. So the friend is confused and they say, you know, please calm down. Like, I'm not saying anything bad here about you. I'm saying you're not a horrible person. Maybe you need to think a little bit more about what you're saying here because you're sounding a little irrational. So this woman who's abused, she hears this and she says, what the hell is wrong with you? Are you gaslighting me? Are you a narcissist? What? I thought you were my friend. I thought you supported me. I don't like you. I hate you. If you've ever been in an online support group for people who've been through abuse, you've probably seen this conversation play out many, many times. So what's going on here? Is the friend being an asshole? Should the friend be listening more? Is the person who says that they're a horrible person, are they not thinking straight? What's happening? Well, for one thing, it's common after we've been abused to experience symptoms of PTSD if we don't have post-traumatic stress disorder in full. And one of those symptoms is to feel that we're to blame for things or somebody else is to blame for things. Basically that there's blame at all, and we either pour it on ourselves or we pour it out on the person who abused us. And so it makes total sense that this woman who's been abused is saying, I'm a horrible person, I deserve this. It also makes sense that the friend doesn't want this woman to think of herself as a horrible person and is trying to encourage her to see a different way of looking at things. What's going on is there is a problem with the way that they're communicating with each other, and unfortunately, where there was trying to be the friend offering some help to this person who's been abused, the person who's been abused has interpreted it as gaslighting, and now they don't feel good about their friend and they don't feel comfortable and they don't have the support that they need. In fact, now they actually see their friend as an abuser and they don't want to be around that person anymore. Now, a lot of people are going to hear that scenario and they're going to say, yeah, the friend was a jerk. They weren't listening to the person tell their side of the story and they weren't being empathetic, and so they were being an abuser themselves. They were gaslighting the friend. Now, other people might flip it around and see it the other way, and they might say, hey, this friend was trying to help out, and now you've got this person who's been abused, who's a victim. They're now turning around and doubting the reality of the friend. The friend doesn't see them as miserable. The friend doesn't see them as having to deserve what they went through. And so the victim is actually kind of turned around and now is gaslighting the abuser. Or at least what they're seeing as an abuser, because they're labeling the friend as somebody who's gaslighting them and classifying them as an abuser. As you can see, this can get really confusing really quickly if you don't pick it apart slowly and see what's actually going on. So there are a few things that are going on here that I think are mistakes, and the most obvious one is that the friend is actually not validating the victim's experience. And so the victim's saying, hey, I am a horrible person, I deserve this, and instead of the friend saying, you know, I can understand why you would feel that way, I see why you might feel that way as a result of the things that you went through, the friend instead is immediately challenging that and saying, like, no, you're not, no, you don't deserve this, and that's a misstep. It's a common misstep, but it is a misstep. If we want to look at this from the other side, then the victim in this case could have recognized that their friend is trying to be helpful, and even though they're saying, you know, you didn't deserve this, you're not a horrible person, their intentions are good, and they are a friend, and they're not trying to gaslight them, they're not trying to harm them in any way. The next mistake is that because the victim misinterpreted the intention of the friend, they got angry, and they started to lash out, and so their anxiety level raised, and that intensity and that anger and that feeling could be felt by the friend, and so the friend got a little bit defensive in reaction to that. And then the friend again made a mistake, and they were understanding that this person was riled up and that they were angry, but they weren't empathetic in the words that they chose, and they tried to get them to calm down and to relax and tell them maybe like it's their problem. But that's again a miscommunication and a misstep, and unfortunately that's going to probably get the other person more riled up and not feel like they're being validated. So I hope you can kind of see that both people here had things that they could have done differently to have a better outcome, because both people were intending good things. The victim here was trying to express themselves and feel heard, and the friend was trying to listen and encourage them to think differently about their situation and feel better. Another very common misstep that I see that victims make is that they assume that other people have to validate them, that everybody that they come in contact with, even if it's not a friend, if it's just somebody in a support group or somebody in their regular life, they need to validate every experience that they have. They always have to be right. They always have to be acknowledged, and it's simply not the case. That's not an adaptive way of living. It's not resilient, and if you get stuck in that mindset, then you're never going to move on from the trauma that you originally went through, because to move on from trauma, you have to become resilient. You have to be able to live in a world where people sometimes invalidate you, even if it's unintentionally invalidating you. And while I'm talking about unintentionally invalidating people, the friend never intended to invalidate this person's experience. The victim did go through abuse, and the friend never doubted that that abuse happened. The friend was just trying to get them to think differently about it. But the victim heard that, and because of their trauma symptoms, they interpreted it as the friend invalidating them, denying what they went through, and they interpreted it as gaslighting, which may be something that happened to them and that's why they're a victim in the first place, but that doesn't mean that the friend is gaslighting them. Now, another way to avoid this trap of this kind of conversation, because I see this conversation all the time online, and it's even more difficult online because you can't hear the tone of the people that are speaking with you, but another way to avoid this trap is to assume the best in the other person, whether you're the victim or the friend in this situation. Assume that the other person has your best interests and they're trying to help you. No matter how it comes out, they actually care about you, and what they're saying because they want you to feel better and they want you to get better. If you're the victim in this situation, what you can do is to try to teach the other person how you want to be spoken to. So if the friend says to you, no, you're not a horrible person, you don't deserve what happened to you, you could respond saying, well, actually, that's how I feel, and I want you to acknowledge how I feel. So can you just let me know that you hear that and you understand how painful that is for me? And that gives the friend the opportunity to correct what they were saying and to let you know that, yes, they do hear what you're saying. They never intended to not hear what you were saying, but you're prompting them to say, I just want to know that you get it. We have to be really careful during these situations, because when we have these conversations, as soon as those defenses come on, then everybody starts acting narcissistically and they're only thinking about themselves and defending themselves, and it becomes really hard to have empathy and think about the other person. We also have to be careful that if we are the victim of abuse, we don't get stuck always being the victim of everything and seeing everybody as trying to attack us. And we also have to be careful not to make it so that everybody around us has to always agree with us on everything, because if we start moving in that direction, we start moving into symptoms of obsessive compulsive personality disorder, where everybody has to do things according to the rules that you set. What I'm really kind of getting at here is that there's a lot of ways for somebody who's been a victim of abuse to unintentionally go on to develop personality characteristics that make them a little bit more like an abuser themselves. And we see this a lot when children are raised under abusive parents. They grow up and they develop defense mechanisms that wind up becoming abusive when they have children. As victims of abuse, we have to be careful that we're not denying somebody else's reality because we're demanding that our reality be recognized. It can be true that you feel that you deserve the abuse that you went through, while your friend also believes that you did not deserve it. As victims, if we start to deny the reality of other people who have different opinions about what's going on, then we start to form a pattern of gaslighting them because they have to conform to the way that we believe things should be, and we actually wind up emotionally abusing them. Now, there are going to be people who hear this and they're going to say, well, you're gaslighting me right now. You're trying to get me to not believe that I'm a victim of things. That's actually not what I'm doing at all. I believe that if you've been through abuse and you're a victim of abuse, you can label yourself a victim as long as you want. You can do that for the rest of your life. I'm okay with that. I've been a victim of abuse and I still call myself a victim of abuse. My intention here here is actually to validate your experience and let you know that you have been a victim, and it's okay to have these feelings that it's my fault or it's their fault and they're a terrible person or I'm a terrible person. However you decide to see what happened to you, that's okay, that you should feel that way. But I also want to give you the alternative to see how you might be harming your current relationships based on the way that you're reacting to a trauma that happened in your past. Part of healing from PTSD in general is having resilience, and part of resilience is having a support network of people who understand you and who can validate you. And sometimes we have to educate the people around us what validation looks like and what it sounds like. And I want that for you. I want you to have good relationships. I do not want to see you spending the rest of your life fearing people and thinking that everybody is out to harm you. If this is a topic you're interested in, please hit subscribe and hit the bell after you hit subscribe to get notified every time I do a video. I have over 250 videos on mental health on this channel, and there is something for you here. It started raining out here. It's getting a little dark. I need to head home, but I want to know from you, what has this conversation sparked for you? Have you learned anything? Do you disagree with me? Leave it down in the comments below. I did say this would be an interesting comment section. I've got bugs flying all over the place. But thank you for joining me here, and thank you for learning. If you want to support me, my mission is humanizing mental health, and you can do that over on Patreon. I'll put the link above. I wish for you a happy and healthy life and good relationships.